has included having a sexual nature. Did Jesus live with human sexuality?
Paul himself says that he was tempted in all things. And if he was tempted in all things, surely he was tempted with women.
The Bible provides no details of how Jesus might have experienced sexual temptation, but it also gives no information on his life from puberty until he was 30 years old. Some scholars make the assertion, shocking to many, that Jesus may have taken a wife during those years. Throughout the scriptures, Jesus never directly talks about either abstinence or married love. But once, when his followers ask him whether it would be better for a man to remain celibate, he makes a radical proposition.
There are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let anyone accept this who can. Matthew 19:12.
When Jesus says some are eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, he's talking about those who give up marriage and the company of a spouse for the sake of the gospel. Someone who gives one's life entirely to the mission of proclaiming the gospel. It certainly shouldn't be interpreted in a literal sense.
Jesus recognizes that celibacy is impossibly difficult for many people.
He ends his statement with the comment, "Let anyone who can accept this, accept it." My suspicion is that he knows not everybody would be able to accept this sort of radical teaching.
One who was able to accept this teaching was the Apostle Paul, who devoted his life to spreading the gospel of Jesus to the Gentiles. Many of the letters that he wrote to the first Christian communities were included in the New Testament.
To the unmarried and the widows I say that it is well for them to remain unmarried as I am. But if they are not practicing self-control, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to burn. 1 Corinthians 7:8.
Paul suggests that it's better to marry than it is to burn with passion. This is not a terribly strong endorsement of marriage.
Paul's enthusiasm for celibacy was grounded in his unwavering belief that the end of the world was imminent. He was convinced that Jesus was going to return and usher in the kingdom of heaven, not in a matter of years, but within weeks, or perhaps even days. It was a time of spiritual crisis. The ancient Hebrew tradition that celebrated married sexuality was turning into one that honored chastity. There were significant physical benefits to this spiritual discipline.
Celibacy actually provides several advantages, particularly for women. In antiquity, when women's health was in danger through pregnancy and certainly during childbirth, celibacy could provide her a means of perhaps prolonging her life.
Though Paul prefers celibacy, he does not condemn marriage.
If you marry, you do not sin. So then, he who marries his fiancée does well, and he who refrains from marriage will do better. 1 Corinthians 7:28.
The New Testament provides options both for celibacy and for marriage. That's what makes it a very helpful book. You could do it this way or that way. Celibacy is commended by the Jesus tradition, by St. Paul, who wishes all could be celibate as he is. But on the other hand, marriage is commended as well in household codes where husbands and wives are to give each other mutual physical satisfaction. Jesus actually goes to a wedding at Cana and caters.
The New Testament's reasons for supporting marriage are very different from those found in the Hebrew Bible.
Procreation is not a major concern in the New Testament, and here there's a distinction from the Hebrew Bible where the matriarchs are continually seeking to have a child. In the New Testament, in Jesus' tradition, the concern is to become like little children, not to produce them.
Indeed, Paul recommends marriage as a way to avoid carnal sin. Next, the New Testament addresses the problem of unbridled lust and the many forms of forbidden sexuality. The first Christians strove to spread the word of Jesus' salvation, as well as God's guidelines for virtuous living. Jesus' first followers had been brought up with the moral codes of their Jewish ancestors, but the sexual ethics of the Gentiles they sought to convert were dramatically different. In a world dominated by the pagan Roman Empire, a variety of sexual appetites were known and even celebrated. Roman law permitted polygamy, divorce, and prostitution, both female and male. Tradition allowed for the carnal union between men and boys, the sexual use of slaves, and the sacrifice of unwanted infants through abortion and infanticide. Christians prided themselves in a dramatically different view of sexuality.
This is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from fornication, that each one of you know how to control your own body in holiness and honor, not with lustful passion, like the Gentiles who do not know God. 1 Thessalonians 4:3.
Unlike the Hebrew Bible, which acknowledges prostitution, the New Testament condemns it absolutely.
Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Should I therefore take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Never. 1 Corinthians 6:15.
Yet tradition says that one of Jesus' closest associates was a prostitute. However, the ancient belief that Mary Magdalene was once a harlot is not supported by anything in the New Testament. What is the genesis of the story that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute? Some believe it was a reputation given her by later Christian teachers who were determined to keep women in their traditional place.
Some scholars have suggested that Mary Magdalene simply got bad press, that she was Jesus' favorite, that he conveyed to her secret teachings, that she was the most favored of the apostles. Later church leaders thought, nah, can't have this, can't have a woman in leadership roles. Let's condemn her. Let's accuse her of sexual crimes. Let's turn her into a prostitute.
In the time of the Jewish patriarchs, adultery was condemned largely as a property crime, the illegal use of another man's wife. But polygamous marriages, concubines, slaves used for sex, all this was found in the Hebrew Bible. In the New Testament, Jesus broadens the definition of adultery. For him, it is any sexual activity outside the bonds of marriage between one husband and one wife.
Let marriage be held in honor by all, and let the marriage bed be kept undefiled, for God will judge fornicators and adulterers. Hebrews 13:4.
Even lustful thoughts are deemed sinful.
You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you, that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Matthew 5:27.
relationship between proper thinking and proper action has been a matter of concern for religions throughout human history. Across the globe, prophets of many faiths have wrestled with this difficult issue. The Buddha, Mohammed, and Jesus. Jesus taught that marriage could not be broken except by death. He said that divorce and remarriage was a form of adultery. But Jesus' condemnation of divorce does not seem absolute. While Mark and Luke report that Jesus is uncompromising on the matter, Matthew's version allows for termination of a marriage in cases of unchastity or adultery.
So what we see is a very strong tradition of Jesus that the early Christian communities have difficulty with, and in two cases, Matthew's community and Paul's community make exceptions to Jesus' prohibition of divorce, which is very important because it says that the church has a certain ability to reinterpret the Jesus tradition in terms of real pastoral problems in the life of the community.
Throughout the Bible, judgment is often tempered with mercy. In the Gospel of John, the Pharisees bring an adulteress to Jesus as a challenge to his wisdom.
They said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" John 8:4.
How can Jesus stand by his teachings on adultery, yet at the same time be merciful? He confounds the Pharisees with an unexpected answer.
Let he who is among you without sin cast the first stone. John 8:7.
Stunned and shamed, her accusers file silently away. Jesus then confronts the sinner, one-to-one. This woman has committed a crime that he considers deeply offensive, both to God and to her marriage.
Jesus said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, sir." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on do not sin again." John 8:10.
Although Jesus teaches about celibacy and about sex between men and women, he says nothing about homosexuality. In the Hebrew Bible, same-sex relations are mentioned very few times, but when they are discussed, they are unequivocally condemned.
If a man lies with a man as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall be put to death. Leviticus 20:13.